conversation with. Thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation with Samrudha. Thank you everyone at the library at Jindal Global University. Now, we have had many conversations before, but this one is particularly exciting because we are going to be talking about two books that he has co-authored with a very diverse, a team consisting of with individuals with expertise in diverse fields, and we shall have more to say about that. Both these volumes try to provide a very detailed documentation on account of the production and various related aspects of what the authors call vernacular furniture from the states of Gujarat and Rajasthan. And it is also important to notice, take note of the fact that both these volumes, quite tomes in themselves, are extremely rich in documentation in several ways. Of course, they are rich in discussions, in text, the amount of information they provide on various aspects of production, those who were involved in the production, the social, economic, and other aspects that went in, that played a significant role in the production of vernacular furniture. But it's also very rich in the visuals that have been provided to get us a sense of this fascinating world of vernacular furniture. It's not just photographs. Of course, there are several of them, but they are also accompanied by various kinds of drawings that help us understand the details of the design and the various processes that were various factors that clearly, shaped the way they were produced. Now, all of this might give us the impression, the richness of the visual material might give us this impression that it's either a catalog of vernacular furniture, or that it is both these volumes are coffee table books. In fact, it is neither. It is a substantial study of probably a much neglected area of craft production and the social historical background that played a very important role in their production. And like any good research work which they have taken up, the team consisting of Samrudha and his colleagues, they also offer us a very diverse set of questions that those interested might want to can take up. So they are in fact open up a new field, provide a rich body of documentation, but also leave us with several questions which is there open for all of us to pursue further. And who knows, they themselves might pursue them a little later. So without saying much more about the details of the book, let's start the conversation with Samrudha. The format of the session has already been explained to you. So yeah, that's Samrudha. Before we get into the details of the book and the array of vernacular furniture document, maybe you could tell us a little about what were some of the motivations that led to a project such as this, that there is a need to do it, that there's a need to document, and that the documentation that you and your colleagues would provide will have to be of the kind that finally we see in these two volumes.
Yeah. So if I have to speak in a very story-like manner, it started off, the genesis, or it starts off in 2014, where there's a research cell at SEPT called Design, Innovation and Craft Resource Center. And the co-founder and the executive director of the center, Professor Jay Thakkar, he was invited at the South Asia collection in Norwich, UK, to study some of the vernacular architecture pieces in the collection. Now, during his visit over there, he was having a conversation with the founders of South Asia Collection, who are Philip and Jeannie Millward. And it came across that they have a beautiful collection of furniture pieces from the South Asia. However, there isn't much information about them. So the people they interacted with often gave them bits and pieces on. There was hardly any contextual information about each of these pieces. So it was obvious that a project like this was in line once the three of them were discussing. And when Mr. Jay came back to India, the project details were discussed, and it started off as a survey project. So the idea was to take up Gujarat, because DICRC was in Gujarat, and we have been working closely with the craft communities in Gujarat. So the idea was to take up Gujarat, exploring the existing network, and then take it further to other regions of India, which is the northwest region, including Gujarat, Rajasthan, and later Punjab, Haryana. Now, so it started off with a very small team with just four of us, which was Jay himself leading the project. Then there was Mitraja Bes, who is the lead author for Sahaj, Mansi S. Rao, who is the lead author for Anaikya, and I, who's the co-author of both these books. So it was a very small team, and we come from various backgrounds, from interior design to product design, architecture, uh, and we have worked with and around craft and craftspeople at a certain in various nature. So I still remember that in 2000, so it was just four of us in the start, and I still remember the first field visit I was doing was in the winter of 2015. I had gone to Kutch, and I remember that the nature of the project was such that when we started, we absolutely had no idea what we would encounter. We had a certain because we have been working with craft and craftspeople. So in photographs, we had seen some furniture. In our literature review, we had seen mentions of furniture, like there were I remember we had read books of Professor Handa, where so this was an anthropological study where there were mention of a certain type of seat, but not much beyond that. So we knew that okay, we would encounter something like this, but it was quite a open field. And hence the nature of this project has been very organic in terms of how it has grown since 2015, and even going on right now. And we so that's how we started. And at the moment, so I'll just share my screen with to show you the impact the project has had. That the project has now there are over 50 to 60 contributors to these projects in the past 5-6 years now. So everyone uh, contributing in a certain nature. So the diversity of the team is not just about different skill set one is bringing. For example, I can recall the GIS wizard which we have, Mr. Piyush Shah, who helped us with mapping all these furniture across the regions of all these places. But it has also to do with the with the social nature of the project, right? So the team was also brought together looking at that. So, for example, in some regions, because of the social hierarchy, uh, there were places only where female researchers will have access to some sort of a conversation, whereas in some places only a male researcher will be invited for a certain gathering. So the nature of the team was also considering all this. And that's how, so other than the expertise they brought to the table, this was also one of the factor. And I think that's how now 50, 60 of us across the world have come together to contribute in the project. And the project is not just about the two books. So the two books are one of the major outcomes, there are 4 catalogs of Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Haryana, which are more like what you mentioned, of images with a snippet of information. And other than that, there is a website about the project. We have also been featured in Google Arts and Culture, where we have written a couple of stories about these furniture and also our method of going about doing the project. So yeah, I think that answers the question. Yeah.
But then, you spoke about that the project team being quite a one that had about 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
What one also understands is that you mentioned a lot of people who were already into various aspects of design, and perhaps many who sort of facilitated the various ways in which the project could be executed. But you also see that there are people with specific interest in material cultures, in the study of material culture, the anthropology of material cultures, and so on. Now, did the fact that you were not just looking for a large number of people, the team was not just a large one, but that they also came from different disciplines with their own set of questions, did that have any impact in the way the project began to be framed?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Because we have Ben Cartwright, who's also the co-author of all these books, who's anthropologist. He did his PhD from Cambridge, and along with that, Mansi has also done her higher education in material culture. So so I think that was a confluence of these two worlds of design as well as material culture, where so we had a lot of heated arguments about whether to use a certain term, because in design the term might mean something, but in anthropology it is completely different. And the debates is, or the diversity of the group and from various fields is what brought this book together. So I think definitely the diversity in terms of the variety in terms of professions also made sure that the book is versatile for the readers, because it not just has visuals but of text in a certain nature, of a certain historiographical point of view. Also, it has drawings which if for a woodworker or if a designer or a conservation for someone who is interested in conservation will be quite interested in. So I think that's why the book caters to a very large audience and not just is confined to a coffee table book. Yeah.
You just mentioned the discussions that you have had about the use of a term, several terms in one field and what it might have meant in another field. That leads me to, what does the term vernacular furniture mean? Because the term vernacular is used for a large number of people. It is a term that is in use in the context of language, a classical language, a language which has a literary tradition, all of that, and certain other languages, and a lot of people also have some difficulty these days with the use of the term vernacular in terms of its origin and so on and so forth. So what does vernacular furniture mean, and why this term in the context of furniture?
Yes, we have been encountering this question or something similar to an argument rather about the term because of the interdisciplinary nature of the project and the people we are interacting with, right? So as mentioned, that the project sort of stems from or is rooted in the field of architecture. And as an introduction to understanding furniture, we thought we would confine ourselves, or like we would be in the context or domain of design. And in design, the understanding of vernacular architecture is, if I can say, close to something like by the people, for the people, using local resources or regionally available resources, right? Now, we went ahead with that sort of an understanding, and hence, because we wanted to the project to be relatable to this audience, which is an established, who have an established terminology, we used this particular term. And unlike the understanding of vernacular which linguists have, which is about classical or old, So the other difference over here is that vernacular furniture doesn't or need not mean old or antique uh, or classic, right? There are instances where a certain, unfortunately rare, but there are instances that craftspeople are still there who are practicing making of these furniture pieces, right? So that is one somewhere which where we have certain distinction between with the term. However, it is not entirely the vernacular furniture is rooted in language as well. So, for example, uh, in Gujarat, we had this. We encountered that furniture is named in certain ways, right? So every furniture not just had a gender, but even in sorry, they had a certain gender also. There were certain neutral terms, and they were very well connected to the feature of that particular furniture. So this particular graph or this particular typology shows that, you know, when furniture, for example, a patlo or a patla, that is when it is referred to as masculine and when it is referred to as feminine. For example, if I have to show one example, when I was in Kutch, we found two granaries which are called a kotho and a koti. Now, this was the first time I encountered this, and I asked, like, both are granaries, and why is one called some kotho and why is the other called koti? And the answer which I got was to do with the shape of it. Both served as granaries. So this one on the left was called a kotho, where the one on the right was called koti. So it has to do with the shape. So I'm digressing a little in terms of the use of the word vernacular, but still it's rooted in the way vernacular furniture is called in the particular language. So
before we
yeah,
get into the specific, you've already started talking about the specifics in terms of,
yeah, yeah,
but a couple of questions more before we get into such specifics. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
in fact, I have a couple of questions in terms of the time and space addressed in these two books. One
Yeah.
is that both these books, the much of the material that you try to document and discuss in great detail, they all seem to come from the early years of, or the first few decades of the 20th century. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what is now? Obviously, such traditions of furniture production would have been in existence, I suppose, even before. So,
Yes. Yeah.
what was some of the? So, I have two questions about that. One, what was the reason for sort of, deciding on this period in such terms? Now, and second, even though you may have focused quite a bit on the furniture, starting the early years of 20th century, from the way you and your colleagues went about investigating several aspects of such furniture production, I'm sure you would have had a chance to get to understand what was vernacular furniture production like, before 20th century. So if you could give us a sense of, what this world was like before the period that you explicitly discuss in great detail.
Yes. So one of the reasons why the nature of the project was highly survey oriented. So we have studied the furniture which we have found, which we were able to interact with, and which we could study in greater detail. And it so happens that most of them are from either this or the previous century, right? Hence the limitation to uh, to to 20th century furniture, the latest. But so that was one of the reasons. And uh, why we couldn't find older? There have been instances where a couple of museums have well taken care of furniture which were much older. Uh, However, so unlike architecture, furniture is something which moves around, which gets traded, which gets repaired, or even replaced when not functional, right? So that is one of the reasons where probably we couldn't find something which is older than that, and it's difficult to date something like this on field. However, some museum examples are there, and not just that. Speaking of traditions where furniture was, so the way we found that the furniture existed before time period like this. So our references like these. So this painting on the right is from 1750, about 1750, and it shows a certain footstool, right? Which is seen on field, used for different purposes, right? There are examples if you go through catalog where we find something similar. Now these are ways in which we know that this particular style of furniture or this type of furniture was being made. There are other examples where even uh, 10th century sculptures which had sihasan in them. So these were a few references we had. However, because we couldn't find them on field, we have confined ourselves to a certain time period. And to answer your second part, like which was some important changes which have happened in terms of production over time. Now, there were two examples which come to my mind when I want to show this example. Um, One is of sorry. One is of a Maju, which is found in the Porbandar region of Gujarat. Now, as per our field records, we have a rough idea that they are in a certain order of chronology. The left being the oldest and the right being one of the two being a newer variant or versions or interpretations of what is a Maju. Now, these have started. If you observe them closely, they have already started showing some type of change in them. So, from being completely made from wood, there is some ceramic incorporated in some lacquer or some polish incorporated in it. To now a little bit use of techniques like nailing, use of veneer, use of locks, padlocks, to something like glass painting. Now, these examples show us that there have been some sort of changes in furniture over time. And not just this, like if I have to show you one more example, we have taken this in further detail in one of the conclusion chapters of Anaikya, where we talk about how the making has changed over time, where we see objects which are being made from plastic, which have similar texture as ones made from bamboo. However, the texture does not aid in the functioning of it to something which is made from metal over here, right? One of those granaries. Yeah. So definitely there has been change in terms of how they are made.
Now, you know, in your response to one of my earlier questions, gender of furniture. There is a larger classificatory scheme that you and your colleagues seem to have followed in both these books. One, the kind of taxonomy, classifying furniture into 6 broad categories. One used for used for seating, one second sleeping, third storage, four what you call surface, and the fifth one vastu objects. Now, where does this taxonomy come from? Is this internal to the craft tradition that you're talking about? And and what is the basis for this classification? Is it in terms of functionality? Is it in terms of materials that you would have used? Or is it even the case that some craft persons work, or that it required different kind of expertise to produce some of them? So what is at stake in this taxonomy?
So I think there's no straightforward answer to this because it has been a very complex process to understand the diversity of furniture which we have found across these regions. And we found that there is, to understand the furniture, so there have been some efforts or some references where the furniture was tried to, furniture was represented. However, it did not fall in the categories of table and chair, right? So one of the major difference, so I'll just show you one of the major difference in what we have come up with is that this furniture typology is based on activities the furniture are used for. So there are five categories or five typologies which we have come up with, and they are asan, manj, manjush, sapat, and vastu. Asan being furniture which is used to sit, manj as a bed, storage. Manjush is a form of a storage. Sapat is a surface which you would use for either working, or storing something, and vastu is vastu are various objects which we are which we could call them as furniture, and so it's a miscellaneous sort of objects which are complementing the other furniture. Now, this particular taxonomy of understanding objects have been extremely organic. If I have to show you, like if we sit and if I have to show you some earlier data of the project, it was extremely complex because we had about 1,600 accounts of furniture, and to make sense of them, it was extremely complex. And it has been a very, as I said repeatedly, it has been an organic process, the whole project. So the the same five types we have taken up in Anaikya. However, what's in them has changed. However, you'll find some common aspects. And one thing which we have retained is that we have kept the regional name as the way, as what the object is, right? We haven't classified them into bench or a low chair or something like that, but the regional chair. So the English translation is not a definitive term, but rather an equivalent for us to understand or to translate. So that's how we have come up with, and it has been growing in the Rajasthan, and with Punjab and Haryana, we have been able to accommodate further. So there is no hard and fast rule that we need to accommodate in a certain subtype and a type, but rather much more open to what's there and how it's being used.
Now, what? So now let's slowly kind of get into some of the specifics of furniture. What is the kind of you mentioned that the very term vernacular furniture refers to materials from a particular region, the very local region being used for the production and so on. You tell us a little bit about the kind of raw materials that were used in the production of furniture. It's not just wood, you see use of dye, colors, and a range that have been used. So where, what are some of the raw materials that are, most widely used? And are there, very interesting exceptions that come about in specific cases or occasions?
Yeah. So as you could see in the typology chart, the way in which the furniture is made is extremely varied, and it is directly linked to a certain geography in which the furniture is made, a certain culture in which the furniture is being made. And if you have to note down the number of the number of crafts which have been used, we have a glossary in both the books, and both of them run in 2 pages. And so from something called lip and calm to mud mirror work to metal beating, there are, in that itself, there are 4 to 5 types in across the region. So there is no direct way of saying that, oh, this is the raw material and this is how it has been used. I can show you examples of two furniture pieces, and to just show you the diversity of materials and how they change in its form and their aesthetic and everything. Just uh, one second. Yeah, so one example would be of a khat, mosa, macha, or a khatli, or a machli. Now, the name itself in various regions is called different, and we have tried to be as accurate in terms of which region what it's called, with some exceptions. Uh, Now, as you can see in this particular, I'm sure all of you would be aware, most of you would be aware of a furniture of this sort, because it's uh, quite common across South Asia. And however, we found a lot of variation in the same concept of a charpai, right? Or a khatli, or however you want to pronounce it or call it. Now, there are four legs, four members which join the legs, and there is webbing across in those horizontal members. However, the webbing, the way it's done, the material which is used, the changes in the material, and the complexity of the material, the webbing, not just change what the item, what the charpai is called, but also who has it, right? So, for example, something like this, which uses a horn of a blackbird, is called a singadu, because it uses a sing while making the webbing of this particular furniture, of this particular charpai, and it's found in a certain region of Rajasthan. To something like this, where it shows a step well, so it's associated with that, and to something like which has a chopard, or one of those traditional games. So people would sit around it and use this as chopard, and other various types of webbing techniques which have been used. Now, this itself shows that because the availability of cotton, or the availability of coir has, or even later in nylon straps, has led in the way the furniture is being made, or even the type of wood. If you see a few examples of Gujarat, where uh, in some tribal communities they would just cut wood of a certain length and give it to a person who would know how to make the joineries, and the shape of the wood will then define the shape of your bed, or the surface you sleep on. And this is what is, so we have also shown the various ways. So you can use old cloths and then make rope out of it, something like this, and then web your bed, right? So there are some nylon straps used here. So I think that shows how raw material is closely associated with the furniture and its name. Another, I think that the example which I gave earlier about the maju also shows that the availability of ceramics change the proportions of the maju, the availability of glass and glass painted objects also change, and it's not just about availability, but also something which is sought after. So, like us right now, where we want new things, or like something which is uh, trending. Also, I feel that that's how it would have been. It's a speculation that if a lot of people have a certain similar thing, you want something unique, and if the craftsperson is exploring a certain new material, then it translates into the furniture itself.
Now, a related question now, one thing is that it is comes from the very same region in which it is, where finally it's produced and used. Now, and which would also mean that it was expected that the material that you would use were sensitive to region. And
Sorry, can you repeat that?
no, I was saying, I was about to ask, one of the one of the things about vernacular furniture is that it comes from the material from the very region in which it's made, and
Yes.
not necessarily from a far off place, even probably in the 19th century or 20th century, when a lot of timber, in fact, comes from eastern parts. Right. So in order, and I suppose one of the things that would have been a concern for people who are into craft persons into making furniture would be that it should be able to withstand the specific characteristics of that region. So do you think the way in which some of these raw materials are sort of undergo a process to make them sturdy and long lasting, which may still be very, given the conditions of that region, it could be weather, it could be, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I will just give you an example where the type of wood which is available in the certain region defines the proportion of an object. For example, if in a certain arid region of Rajasthan, the available wood will be thin, so it's narrow, and because the availability of timber is not as much as something like a well-forested area like Dungarpur, which is in the southern eastern part of Rajasthan, and that itself will allow you to make longer planks because the wood over there has much more width. You can have because it can be milled in a certain way. Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Sure.
So that itself illustrates that something like this particular object, because this has been made in smaller planks which are curved in nature, and that itself gives the character to the objects, that the wood used is placed in an array closely knit, right? And because it is of a narrow nature, you need more reinforcements. You need all these wooden reinforcements over it, because you need to make sure that it is sturdy enough. In case of places where there is longer widths of wood available, you would not have. So if you compare these two, the reinforcement are much uh, spaced out, because the wood has that particular nature. So I think that is how a few objects have been understood to be from a certain region, because they use that sort of a wood. If they're using a Rohida wood, which is found in a certain part of Rajasthan, and we know it is of Rohida because we know that it has smaller strips. Yeah. Does that illustrate the point?
Yes, I think so. And of course, there is a lot more to get to know about it, and the volumes themselves, offer enormous amount of detail to look at what has been going on. But now, you've been into design, so why don't you take us through, maybe take a couple of examples of furniture that you have, studied and tried to document, and tell us what would have been the processes or various stages of design and, production of such vernacular furniture. Feel free to use a couple of examples so that people get to, those who are joining us this evening, get a sense of the process of the making of furniture.
Yeah. So I will take you through one of my favorite object, and I think most all authors of the book will agree, because I've been going gaga about this particular furniture, is the Maju, which is both found. It's called Majus in Gujarat and a Maju in Rajasthan. Now, for the when we saw it first, it looked like an extremely simple object. However, when we interacted with the people, we understood that this is much more complex, because each of this had somewhere between 4 to 16 secret compartments within it, right? And there is a certain sequence in which this particular these compartments will be accessed. And this particular sequence will be known only to the owner of the object, owner of the Maju, and the person who crafted it or their descendants of the craftsperson. So only so that they can mend it or repair it and something like that. And this object has been passed down from one head of the family to the heir. And this itself shows that, you know, there is a complex set of design process which happens during the making of these objects, because I think we documented or we understood the secret compartments of at least 6 to 7 of them on field and a couple of them at Sadak. And we understood that each of them had a certain variation in terms of how it was made, how the secret compartments were set. So a certain object we will pull a wedge, in a certain object we will push a wedge, right? So that is the way the security measures, I would call that, were set in this particular Maju. So it's somewhere is a strong box, but not just that. You'll also keep clothes in it. You'll also keep documents in it, perhaps some valuables, and yeah. So the drawing of it then now shows us. So that's where the drawing becomes important part of the study, because when we start drawing these objects, we understand that, you know, so the outer dimensions do not match with the inner dimensions, and hence we know that there are certain secret compartments. And then how do we start? So even the grains of these secret compartments have been matched. So there is a lot of care taken in terms of how these are made, and this itself shows the complexities which the craftspeople have been ideologically as well as in terms of their craftspersonship to come up with an object like this. And if I have to show you that there have been instances. So this is from the grandfather of a craftsperson who made this object, and they have been using tools which are very simple in nature and available to all of us, but still the amount of complexities they could achieve were incredible. And it just leaves us to speculate how the design process would be. Unfortunately, there are no set guidelines of how they went about it. But it has been passed down. In few places, there are still people who practice it, but most of it seems to be seems to have kept for us to imagine, right? But these are the instances which allow us to take a peek through their lens of looking at objects inside out.
So, you know, imagine, you know, an enormously complex piece, object that you just discussed. Would this have been one, and because of the very nature of work that, you know, it had to have secret chambers and so on, would it have been one craft person working on it, or would it have been a team? And if it was a team, and perhaps even for oneself, do you think they would have been making some kind of a diagram or some kind of a drawing to imagine what it should be like, and, you know, getting the proportions and measurements right?
So this is where we have been struggling, right? So I am led to believe that the way work is done would not have used certain drawings. Perhaps very few sketches on the floor or on the plank of wood itself, but nothing in nature of keeping it as a document. So that's where I'm also conflicted, and perhaps a further set of research or in-depth research can be an offshoot from the project like this itself, or this. We hope that this project will give further research a launch pad to have a project like this. So I think that's where so although there have been instances where we have found certain historical records where a certain charpai or a maju have to be of a certain dimension, we do not know for concrete. We do not have not found concrete instances on field. So that's why it's a little conflicted in terms of its nature, because either it has been extremely oral in terms of how it's been taught, or it has been in terms of an apprenticeship where you just learn while being at the job or while doing it over and over again for years together.
So this leads me to ask you a couple of questions about the community of craft persons themselves. How they sort of organize themselves,
Yeah.
in the form of guilds, and if you look at some of the furniture that you have discussed in great detail, some of them have elaborate ornamentation.
Yeah.
So does it mean that they have a kind of a patron that they're constantly trying to supply, produce and make available to? How is this system working? What is the nature of association? How do they relate among themselves? What do we know about that?
Yeah, so I think that's where that becomes interesting, because it is not always that there is a guild system or a system of patronage. A lot of times, vernacular furniture was just made because you had a need for that object. So a perfect example would be of uh, 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 something like this kotlo, where we have an instance where it was that the female of the house had to know how to make her own equivalent will be a refrigerator, right, or a larder. And because you had a need for it, you need to know how to make it. But that doesn't mean that this Tari Devi or the person would know only how to make that. They would be also working in other chores or have other professions as such. But because there was a need for a certain object, they just make it. So it's not always necessary that it was a formal guild where they are engaged in a certain activity, but vernacular furniture dabbles also that it was you had to make a bed for yourself. So you find the material, you learn certain skills, and you just make it for yourself. So in the conversation we have that because the person likes a certain aesthetic, they can implement that in their own larder, right? And that's the beauty of vernacular furniture. That's what brings the diversity in the furniture, because for different regions we have found examples where above the larder there are a few light bulbs placed, right, which are old filament light bulbs, but then that becomes part of the aesthetic, because something like that was seen caught their eye, right, and then translated into the furniture itself. So see again the use of wood. So in communities which moved from one place to from one house to another, uh, what they could carry were only these shutters. So they will just carry this shutter, perhaps the window here, and the shutter in the furniture. Oh yeah, this is the one where there are light bulbs. So yeah, I'm not sure whether they're visible. And they would carry this from one place to another, and when they have to make another larder in some other place, they just need a certain soil with certain consistency with water, and they can make another version of the same. So it's not always, unlike the Maju which we saw earlier, which was something which was commissioned. Something like this is what people would just make for themselves. So that is the true nature of vernacular furniture or systems which we have found.
So is this production process, is this entirely a male world, or do we see women involved in the production of furniture?
Yeah, exactly. As we saw right now, so the granary which was made by Tari Devi, and I think there is a mix of both. That's why we ensured that we not use the term craftsman, but be more inclusive about it. And because there are instances where there are, so in cuts there are many uh, crafts where women are equal part of the whole process, not just a certain part of the process, but the entire process or the entire the outcome of the process. Right. So I don't think so. When we say craft as a very broad term, it is specific to a certain gender. So we find yeah.
So we are close to 6:30 now. I have one
Yeah.
for now, and then we shall take up questions from that I think they have already started coming in the chat box. So one last question for now, but if there is more time, maybe we will go back to one of the things that one gets a sense of from the book is about the decline of this vernacular production, the tradition of vernacular furniture production.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are the reasons for this decline?
So that's the sad truth, and that's why some visuals, if I'll show you some in time, really disheartened us while we were on field, and it takes me back to uh, like I think talk of 2-3 things to come to this particular point. It takes me back to our association with the furniture and our lifestyle itself. So I want to give a quote. So I'll go back a little in terms of our questions, because I think we missed out some points to make this certain point. So there was this instance where we have from Lord Edwin, and he went during his visit to Bikaner. He wrote, "The people have a way of keeping what at first sight appears to be their dining tables in front of their houses or in the middle of the street. He noticed that people congregated on them for purposes of social intercourse and for playing little games which resemble chess. He records some of the structures, the surface being supported on turned legs like pillar and are capable of holding number of people. So although the understanding of this object was seen to be as a dining table, and I'll just show you that what the object was, and I'll try to link all this to the particular question. And yeah, this was the object which was in question, and this was understood as a dining table, right? Because a certain typology did not support to describe an object like this. But this particular pata, and I would like to call it pata and not a bench over here, uh, was kept at various locations in the walled city of Bikaner to where people can assemble. Now, this was, you can see a certain amount of social hierarchy over here, that people only male were allowed to sit on it, and whenever there was an important gathering, all of them will use this particular furniture. And these are outdoor furnitures kept at every corner and every chalk. We have also mapped them across the walled city. And so now a certain this type of work, there is a certain amount of there's a certain disassociation which we saw earlier, and again I think we see it now. So, and that is why I feel there is a certain decline, because the uh, the lifestyles have changed in terms of not just urban populace, but also in terms of what is aspired in general. So, for example, if uh, we have uh, we have this furniture, we have this chest. furniture called a Patara, which was a bridal gift in parts of Gujarat and some parts of Rajasthan. And it is something where a girl child's belongings are kept and it is given as a wedding gift. And when we see objects like this kept and stacked outside, uh, oh, sorry. Right? Is this visible? Yeah.
Yes.
It's quite disheartening because we don't have space for objects like this anymore, right? When we are moving from one place to another, our houses are firstly not of the same nature as they were, and hence there is no space to keep certain furniture like that. Neither are certain rituals being followed. So hence there's a certain decline in terms of furniture that way. However, that is something which is natural in terms of the way we live. However, what we feel uh, uh, what we would like to bring through this research is also the way we are looking at it. So if we know, like just like someone who's coming from outside and looking at these table and calling them dining tables. So if we know a certain furniture and know about it, we would not be treating it as the way we would be, right? We would not be treating it as for its face value or for just its physical craft or the way, the nature of it. If we know the oral histories about the furniture or its meanings, we would be paying much more respect to it. They would not be used as objects for trade. So if while our research, on-field research, we used to encounter a lot of places where this furniture, people offered us to sell this furniture and for 500 rupees, for 600 rupees. And because that sort of association has been left from the people's lifestyle, and that is what we felt was one of the reasons for the decline. And one of the reasons for also this is that there are a lot of objects which have been a replacement for it. So because there is a decline, because there's less uh, uh, need for something to be made like that, you'll see less people making it, the skills not being passed down from generation to generation. For example, if we need a strong box, I think Godrej Almira does a better job in a lot of ways in terms of keeping something safe, right? And in terms of accessing it. And also something like that is seemed to be more desirable because it's again something which is not old, something which is new. So that is also one of the reasons why we see decline in terms of making of this furniture. And now we also see that this type of furniture, which is now called rustic or antique, is coming back in. There is a demand for it, but out of context, right? So we see a lot of these majus being turned into bars. We'll see a lot of these majus turned into uh, uh, a small furniture or cut into and then used as shoe racks and things like that. And I think that happens because the association with that object has somewhere uh, not there. So with this book, we would like to bring back whatever uh, information or knowledge there is about these furniture. So the next time we see something like this, we are not looking at it from a point of view of rustic, but also from a point of view that it would have had a lot of stories, a lot of associations to its making, and as a culture itself, as a as a as a culture itself.
Some of the, I think we have started getting questions.
Okay.
Let's spend some time. So the first question asks about, are women largely in the production process of specific types of furniture, such as the refrigerator that you mentioned? When you mentioned craftspeople for the creation of storage furniture, were they created mostly by men?
So there is, I would say yes, there is a certain amount of segregation in that sense, but I would not look at it from a lens of. I think that's it's yes, there is a certain amount of segregation in what sort of craft is taken up by women and what sort of craft are taken up by men. But I think we haven't gone in depth of this particular question in terms of this research. However, this research will allow, as I said, as a base for someone who wants to go in detail of gender roles and crafts across these regions. So I think somewhere there we have documented or we have written whatever sort of information we have got. However, we have not remarked on that particular information. Yeah.
The second question is, do we have any startups that take this vernacular furniture to market with a trendy touch and support craft makers?
So yeah, so the first part, yes, there have been various traders who have taken, as I mentioned earlier, who take up these furniture and make it into objects which we would be using in our lifestyles right now. So we have seen examples of someone taking a maju and making into a bar, or splitting it two and making it into a bed. Right? So there are, I don't know if there are, if I would call them startups, but there have been people who have been doing this, have been trading it offshore to various hotels and things like that. However, I don't know how it would support craft makers, because now these objects have been procured from people who own them, people whose it was part of their household. These are not procured from freshly craftspeople, right? So I think that's where somewhere it is a gray line. However, you will also find a lot of craftspeople from the same lineage who are making this as a large scale industry. So if you want a pida, which I showed earlier, and if you want 50 of them for a certain residence or a certain hotel, they would make exactly similar looking pida for you of in that quantity. However, that's what it's do we see it in the same light as it was earlier is the question which we are raising. So
we have another question.
Yeah.
You presented some exploded diagrams of furniture. So I have a question. Did you dismantle each and every furniture on site to study its components?
Oh yeah, this is a personally, I think I would like to explain a lot and talk a lot about this, because as someone, so as a product designer by education, I am quite fascinated by how things are put together, and I love to break down things. However, because these objects are owned by people or kept in museums, it's not available to us in the nature of us being able to pull it up apart. However, what we did, because we were able to see various examples of that particular furniture piece, what also allowed us to speculate is broken furniture. So if we encounter a furniture where one corner is broken, we would try to assess, okay, what sort of joinery is there. So broken furniture was one of the best ways of understanding how most of these objects are made. A lot of times they would be kept outside and they would have gone through a lot of weathering, and that will allow us to understand what sort of material or what sort of reinforcement. So a certain area would remain intact and allow us to understand what sort of riveting mechanisms were used. So I think it took us like we had to study 20-30 of them to understand one whole of that object. But we did ensure that whenever we understand, okay, this would be the way it would have been made, we went back to the detailed images and we made sure that we are closest to how it would have been made. So I think that's...
Yeah. Look, while we wait for more questions to come our way, I have a couple of, maybe I can ask you one more question. In fact, I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
No, so is there a specific, system of measurement that craft persons are using that you have gotten to see? Maybe in the way they were produced that you may have had to infer, but you also have had many opportunity to meet, people who continue to be involved. Maybe that number, oh, I think.
Yeah. So you're talking about.
Are you there? Yeah. So do we, is there a system of measurement they're using? Measurement has been a topic of great fascination for quite some time, right? With ironsmithy and, the making of an, sacrificial altar and so on and so forth. So what is the engagement that you see with measurement and systems of measurement that you see craft persons using?
So that's what in our encounters of a few craftspeople who are still practicing all this, because they are engaged in. So firstly, I would like to clarify there has been a very drastic way in which furniture was being made and is being made. So we had met a few carpenters, 3-generation carpenters, whose the grandfather would say that, say that, oh, now they start using plywood and Fevicol. We never had that, right? So they were confined to something like a wedge, or even nails were not seen in a lot of furniture, right? So there has been a way in which this furniture has changed over time. And similarly, there has been a change in which measurements are used. So because their interaction is with the current market, we hardly see instances where people are using the traditional means and ways of dimensions. Most of them are using the standard scales which we have, or metrics, or inches, things like that. So that's what we have encountered throughout the place. Although metrics is very unlikely; it's mostly inches. And although the way they'll call it dori, they'll call it the way in which inches are subdivided is very local. The terms are very local and different across the region.
We have another question. If you have to pick a furniture for mass production for today's lifestyle, which would that be?
One of the very interesting furniture which I like is it's very yeah, okay. So I feel a water pitcher stand, or a ghaduchi, how it's called. I feel this is a very fantastic and a very simple furniture, and it also shows the importance of water in our culture. Like, we often always find this very peculiar that we are often offered water whenever we go to one place to another. And I feel something like as simple as this particular object, which on which we can keep water stands, could have a comeback in our lives, because it's light. It can be easily accommodated in our smaller homes, and homes which are on 10th floor. It's unlike Patara, which will be extremely difficult to take in a service lift to an 10th floor or something like that. An object like this, which is lightweight, I feel will be perfectly fit into modern life. Yeah. So I think this is a very personal opinion. I'm sure there are many more. There are a lot of objects which can also. So for sitting on floor, there are these objects which you can keep under our knee, which makes it very comfortable. So I think a lot of them are still relevant in our lifestyles and in our ways of being.
We have another question. Was there any influence or similarity with influence of or similarity with Western or other cultures such as the Greek, Persian in these types of furniture?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just find you an example. So this particular furniture is called a bankdo, and it is seen. We have found instances of this in southern part of Gujarat, and it so happened that during our visit to that particular region, we took a couple of days to go to Daman and to just visit Daman, and we saw very similar furniture being in use in the Bomb Jesus Church over there, and it had similar features of this curved handle, right, which translated to in a very vernacular sense the local houses over there. Rural houses over there. And when we came back, we thought we should dig deeper into this. And it seems to be that there has been a lot of Portuguese influence on this object, because a bench in Portuguese is called a banco, and the Bomb Jesus Church is one of the oldest instances where, so we asked around in the church, and we found that these furniture have been more or less in shape and size how they were. And we find, because we have this instance, we know that it has been accepted or become vernacular in that sense. However, what I was speaking earlier, in the region, using you'll find instances where there are ceramic tiles being incorporated in a certain bench of this sort. So there are a lot of features, because what we know of the communities. So Surat, Mandvi have been extremely trade-oriented communities, and hence there are instances where certain motifs you will find in Russia, Volga of certain time. You will find certain motifs also in the traditional Polish embroidery, which are very similar seen over here. So there have been a lot of that's what I don't know if the influence is from one way or the other, but there have been a lot of interaction between these communities across the world.
Yeah. Now, this question leads me to ask, while we wait for more, what impact of colonialism on this production, tradition of craft production, both in terms of one, did it do anything to the kind of work they were doing? Did it affect the availability of materials that they would have been working with? Did colonialism in any way impact the ways in which people are working, its use, its consumption, use, yeah?
So there are various examples where you will find a chair which is then covered with moti work, right? Now, ideally, or there are a lot of paintings which you'll find where there are siasans or thrones which are similar to what in a lot of paintings from the with reference to the colonizers. So I feel there have been a lot of influences in that sense, but to say whether there were influences in terms of making, we'll have to dig a little bit deeper. We'll have to take a certain object and then go in detail about it. So as I said earlier, that firstly there was the studies in itself were very the furniture was not at the center of it, because the paintings which we have used, the center of focus was on the cultural understanding, on what was happening in terms of as an interaction with people. So the object or the furniture took a step down in terms of this study. So the example I gave about Bikaner, where these objects were called dining table, were mentioned because they had a certain social gathering around the object. around the furniture. So I think there was not particular lens with which these were studied for it to have greater impact, at least in these regions. So if I have to make a very loose association, I'm sure in Maharashtra with the Bombay Blackwood, there have been a lot of ways in which the making has also been influenced. But because this project hasn't gone there in detail, I would just leave it to that. But of course, yes, they have been.
Now, you mentioned in several instances, apprenticeship. So is this, someone who's getting initiated into the making of such furniture? Is it necessarily a family thing, or do you also see people, suppose there is a very well-known furniture maker, people traveling from one area to come and study with another, such an important, creative person. You see this in the case of some other crafts, for instance, you see this in the case of sculpture, and you also see this in the case of painting. There are way too many. So do you see something like this, that it's entirely a family, who gets to learn from a senior craft person would be someone in the same family?
So, as I've mentioned earlier, that unfortunately, the instances of craftspeople who are still engaged in the activities are very rare. So either they are the last of their generation, or they're about to close their shop because there is not much work done, or there isn't much known about the pedagogy or they had to sort of have this knowledge within the community, and that's one of the reasons why it's still like we are not able to find people who still have this. But I think there is definitely because the project highlights the need for such research to be done further, and I, for one, is extremely engaged in this in my future commitments to take up ways in which this sort of an apprenticeship or the transfer of knowledge or baton holding was done. Passing down the baton was done from one generation to another. But there is a little, like, we'll have to dig more deeper in this specific knowledge. As this was a very introductory project, we were just trying to understand in what ways the furniture is intricately linked with the community, with the culture, with trade and things like that, with the making itself. Yeah.
So in fact, I think a work along these lines, based on the field study with carpenters in South India, especially Kerala, is probably in the making with, I think, historian K. Sunandan has been working on this volume, as far as I know. It should be published in a few months or so. Let's look forward to that. Yeah. Now, do craft persons come from a specific caste? What do we know about that? Hierarchies.
So, as I said, that we have found that there are, so the carpenters, they were part of a certain caste. So in that itself, what type of carpentry you do were different types of caste. However, the hierarchy is something which we have not commented on. So you have written who are these people who are making these objects or engaging with these objects. But that's what, because our expertise, because the vastness of the project itself didn't allow us to take a narrow view into the hierarchy of all this. We did find instances where, okay, this particular craft is engaged in this particular craft, right? But socially, how they are set or how they are interacting with each other is something which is open for research, or I'm sure there are sociologists and anthropologists who are working in that domain. But I think there are quite a few literary works which are there in us, like in a I'm not saying in association with making itself, but as part of it. So I think a link of this can be formed in the coming research.
It's just 5 minutes for
Yeah.
to 7, and we do not have questions as yet. So maybe one last question from me. The first book, Sahaj, was also the first project that you took up, you and your colleagues. And then a couple of years later, the work on Rajasthan began. By the time you got to start work on vernacular furniture in Rajasthan, what were the significant changes in the very conception of the project that had gone through? How do you see the growth in the very framing, the scope of the project, the difficulties, the issues that you now felt, in the light of your experience of the Gujarat study, that if you were going to study vernacular furniture in Rajasthan, how should it be?
Right. So it has been an extremely organic process, as I keep repeatedly saying, because from the first field visit I went to then later as a group when we started, and to multiple groups, there have been, so we have been learning from every field visit, from every interaction with the community. So it has been an extremely network oriented project, because it is almost impossible that we go knocking on everyone's door that, oh, do you have any old furniture, right? So it has been about networking people, asking all the people we know whether they know of someone in Rajasthan who would have furniture, or if they can just host us for a couple of days and take us around, and then with their information, we can probably knock on people's door and find if their furniture. So all these experiences have made us come up with a certain method. So the way we formulate few questions have evolved over ways. Now we have a few reference images. So when we go to a region, we can show them images. See, we are looking at something like this. Or if have you seen a craft? Do you have someone who is working on a craft like this? So because we have a certain reference, we are able to now dig deeper, right? We are able to take much more themes which are in association with the furniture. So now it has allowed us to take up broader themes into in the project, which started off as first for us to just understand what is we were overwhelmed with the amount of diversity there was in Gujarat. So that is what has changed, that there is a certain structure, yet it is organic, or yet it is open in the nature. We have found we also have certain digital ways of locating these furniture, so we can do studies where these majus from this region have this particular feature, and the majus from the other region have this particular furniture. Because we have mapped it on a map, we could then do analysis of that nature as well. So that has come up over time. So, and I think even with the current group who's extensively working in Punjab, Haryana, these have informed their current discourses to do with the objects, with the furniture.
Yeah. There's one more question for you. Is there a way these books can be made open access, web wide, to all possible would-be users, readers?
Yes. So so books I am not sure of, but at the moment the entire project has been a lot of it has been we have a website for the project which has a lot of this information. There are drawings, there are the typologies, there are images with snippet information. You can find. You can look into a certain type of craft and then find all the furniture which has that particular craft. So the website is on, and it is open source website. So all the students or the future researchers can access it to get a clear or to get an understanding of the books and what the books then further add on to. So, and I think one book is available on Amazon, the other will be made available soon. Yeah. And I think we have been in close contact with a lot of libraries across the world. So we are trying to distribute the books across. So I like this event because of Jindal Global University and many more like this. We are trying to link it to libraries so students get an access to books like this. Yeah.
So I think at the end of the session, and so thank you, Samrudha. Thank you for the book and your colleagues for the books, and thank you very much for this conversation. And let's hope for many more such books, in this series, and in pursuit of your own interest. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Varadarajan. Thank you, everyone, all the supporting staff from Jindal Global University for arranging this at a very short notice, I would say.
And thank you, everyone who joined this evening and sent in questions. Thank you. Yeah. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Finally, I think the program was thoroughly well organized. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I
yes.
audible? The event was very well organized. I noticed there were about 33 participants till the end. They were able to spend time and listen to, because the conversation was so interesting. Indeed, as soon as I first saw these books, I couldn't resist. Then I spent more than a couple of hours to see these pictures and furnitures, because my grandfather or grandmother's figures are associated with the furnitures they were using. I have visited several mansions in Tamil Nadu, and I have all the old people. I remember with the furnitures they use, whether it is a palm leaves box or the easy chair. My grandfather used to take a nap at between lunch and dinner, and so many other furnitures. Then I got remembered to the olden time. Immediately I understood that this job is it's a tremendous job accomplished by your team. It's a great job. I would like to have all these furnitures in all regions of India, if the vernacular word is so broad. And then I would like to see the web of knowledge in terms of furniture making, in terms of aesthetics display, comfort living, using brains to create materials for their own comfort and so on, and then the cultural sociology through the windows of furnitures. All that had a tremendous scope. I hope these projects get a lot of funding, and more documentation happens, and it will be very, very useful for the community. Particularly, this particular titles are useful for sociologists, as you said, anthropologists, and design students, art and architecture students. The usage is very, so wide. And libraries like us would like to have copies, and then, this adds tremendous value to our collections. And I once again thank you so much for Professor Varadarajan and Professor Samrudha for your time and make this event more lively and much more interesting. And I look forward to having more such programs in the future. And on behalf of the Jindal Global University, I would like to thank you both again, and all the participants who asked questions and then who stayed for more than 1.5 hours. So it's a great event for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I hope it's fine to log out now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, please, sir. Please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.